Welcome to the Electric Wire Podcast. We bring you news and views on the most pressing issues facing Wisconsin's electric industry, from policymakers, executives, and customer and environmental advocates. Bringing you these discussions, we are the Customers First Coalition. Here's your host, Executive Director Kristen Jilks.
Welcome to the Electric Wire. I'm Kristen Jilks, and in this special episode, we're bringing you the full recording from the recent Customers First Coalition Power Breakfast with a focus on data centers and energy use. We want to give a special thank you to WisconsinEye for recording and producing coverage of this event and making these important public policy conversations accessible to everyone. WisconsinEye is a nonprofit public affairs network. If you value their work, we encourage you to visit WisEye, WISEYE.org, WisEye.org, and consider making a donation to support their mission. We'd also like to thank the event sponsors who made the Power Breakfast possible. The hyperscale sponsors are Frederickson Law Firm and the Wisconsin Counties Association. All the power sponsors are ATC, the Wisconsin Utilities Association, Alliant Energy, and Stafford and Rosenbaum. Our baseload power sponsors are Focus on Energy, TC Energy, Boardman Clark, and Envision by Amplify Health. Thank you to all of our sponsors. With growing attention on issues like data center development, load growth, and national headlines about grid challenges, this event provided an opportunity to hear directly from experts who are working on these issues every day. Whether you're a customer, policymaker, or industry stakeholder, this discussion offers valuable perspective on what lies ahead for Wisconsin's energy system. Let's go now to the event recording. Thank you again to WisconsinEye for your help in covering and archiving this event. To find the event at the WisconsinEye website, you can follow the link in the show notes or go to wiseye.org, create a free account, and search the archives for Customers First. Thanks again to everyone for participating and listening.
You're watching WisconsinEye, an independent, nonprofit public affairs network, engaging the citizens of Wisconsin since 2007 through access to government proceedings and public policy events. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisEye to 44321.
I want to welcome everybody. I'm Kristen Jilks, Executive Director of the Customers First Coalition, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the 2025 Power Breakfast. It's been a long time coming. This year's theme is data centers and energy use. We have an exciting lineup of speakers and panels ready to explore how Wisconsin's energy sector is adapting to this transformation. Before we begin, I want to mention that we're honored to be joined by several elected officials today. And I want you to do me a favor and don't hold the applause till the end. Let's get the good energy going and make them feel very welcome. So I want to welcome Senator Melissa Ratcliffe, Representative Supreme Moro Mukunde is coming, but I don't see him here yet. Representative Shannon Zimmerman, is he here yet? I think he's not here yet either. Representative Maureen McCarville. Representative Sheila Stubbs, I don't believe is here yet. Representative Vincent Marisi is here from Stevens Point. Thank you for being here. And Representative Scott Krug will be joining as well. So thank you all for being here and for your public service. And a special thank you as well to Chairperson Summer Strand and Commissioner Christy Nieto of the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin for joining today and also providing remarks. And thank you to all of the PSC staff and legislative staffers in the room. We truly appreciate your work in supporting good energy policy and public engagement. And it is now my pleasure to welcome to the stage Mike Bruning, CFC board member from the IBEW Local 2150, who will introduce our first speaker.
Good morning. And thank you for attending our CFC. Just a little bit about myself. I'm Mike Bruning. I'm Assistant Business Manager of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, located here in Wisconsin. Local 2150 represents 5,600 hardworking men and women throughout the state of Wisconsin and the UP. And if you've never heard of us, what we do is we build transmission lines, we staff the power plants, We Energy's utility. We also build the largest substation transformers in the United States. And we even broadcast the Badger and Packer games to bring them to your living room when they play local. So to start off, I would like to introduce Chairperson Summer Strand. She was appointed to the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin in 2023 by Governor Tony Evers. And last year, she was appointed to the lead agency as the chairperson of the commission. She's quickly become a key voice in Wisconsin's energy future. Importantly, she understands the critical role of union workers play in the building and maintaining of infrastructures that power in our communities. And she has been a strong advocate for ensuring energy policy that includes voices of those working to keep the lights on. As we discuss the future of the industry and the many changes happening at a rapid pace, there's no better way to start us off with Summer Strand. Let's give her a round of applause.
Good morning. I had microphone issues last week at my speaking engagement, so just let me know if you can't hear me and I'll take it off. So first, I just want to thank you for having me at the Customers First Coalition Power Breakfast. I'm very excited to kick off the program, and I'm looking forward to the insightful conversation and discussions about data centers and their impacts on nearly all aspects of the energy and utility industries in Wisconsin. Today's impressive turnout illustrates the timeliness and importance of this burgeoning issue in our state. This morning, I'm going to make brief remarks about the data center energy nexus, the role of the Public Service Commission in all of this, and I'll provide some observations from prior successful projects to keep in mind during this time of new development. I will start by noting, even though Cindy's not here, that data center related decisions do come before the Commission. Therefore, my comments today should not be misconstrued as a prejudgment of future cases and the decisions on the various issues within those cases. Those decisions and all of my decisions are based solely on the evidence in the record, and each case is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. As you're well aware, the energy industry is currently experiencing a period of enormous evolution. One of the driving forces behind this evolution is also one of the biggest challenges the industry is facing. For the first time in decades, energy demand is rising. This load growth is primarily attributable to three factors: electrification of cars, appliances, equipment, etc., the return of domestic manufacturing, and the rapid expansion of data centers. Focusing on our topic du jour, data centers represent exciting economic development opportunities for Wisconsin, attracting new business, bolstering the state's workforce, and advancing innovative technology. Yet, data center proliferation raises a number of important issues and impacts to be discussed throughout the program today. The energy data center nexus often refers to the intersection between the rapid expansion of data centers, particularly with the rise of AI and cloud computing, and the increasing energy demands they place on the grid. In other words, increased demand for AI and cloud computing is driving the need for larger, more energy-intensive data centers, which in turn leads to concerns about reliability, sustainability, impacts on customers and the environment, and more. And that's where all of us in this room come in. Policymakers, utilities, regulators, and a variety of stakeholders need to work together to address the challenges of the data center energy nexus and promote solutions that mitigate potential negative impacts while maximizing the benefits these developments can bring to Wisconsin. The two upcoming panels will cover these topics in depth, and I'm eager to hear what the participants have to say. Notably, this nexus echoes the major tenets of the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin's mission to ensure the provision of safe, reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible utility services. In addition to the delicate reliability, affordability, environmental responsibility balance data centers entail, They also involve several other foundational aspects of utility regulation, including but not limited to the obligation to serve, public interest and customer benefit, cost causer, cost payer relationships, rate design and cost allocation among different customer classes, and ensuring fairness, including that unjustly discriminatory rates are not being charged. While many of you are familiar with the purview of the PSC and the important work undertaken by the Commission, I do want to provide some brief context and specific information about our role in relation to data center development in Wisconsin. This should connect dots, or at least help explain why Kristen invited me to help deliver opening remarks on this topic. When a data center is built in the service territory of a Wisconsin utility, that utility has a legal obligation to serve, which means the utility must provide power to the data center even when the demand is large. It is up to the utility to decide what new infrastructure investments are needed to meet the demand, as well as how to pay for the infrastructure upgrades and the cost of serving the data center. If a utility decides to build a new generation facility or major transmission line, they must obtain PSC approval to do so. The PSC also has regulatory oversight of utility tariffs, which set the rates, terms, and conditions of utility service. When utilities wish to adjust customer rates, they must receive Commission approval to do so. Therefore, while the PSC does not approve the construction of the actual data center itself, we do have to review and approve the generation and transmission needed to serve the data center, and in most cases, set the rates to be paid by the new customer, the data center. While data center projects are being developed, negotiated, and reviewed, customer and environmental advocates will likely intervene to protect their respective interests, and members of the public often become engaged to make their voices heard. To issue a decision, the Commission must review and analyze all the information contained in the record of evidence filed in the proceeding. Theoretically, I describe part of our role here as a trust but verify situation, in that we review the information filed by the utility and analyze the impacts to ensure what they propose in their filing is also demonstrated by the Commission's own analysis. Therefore, the Commission's job is an important one, grounded in statute, to review and analyze the record, the impacts to customers, the environment, and the reliability of the grid, and to balance all these interests to arrive at a legally sound and just decision that aligns with the PSC mission and our duties to ensure fairness and protect the public interest. Again, it's important to note that the utility is making decisions, presumably in partnership with the data center developer or end user, and filing the applications with the Commission seeking their preferred mechanisms, instruments, and outcomes. The Commission reacts in response to these filings. The Commission does not dictate the type or location of generation or transmission solution proposed, nor can we prescribe various strategies to address issues and challenges that arise from data center development. However, that doesn't mean that we don't want to help develop solutions and strategies when and where appropriate. While rapid industry change and data center energy nexus challenges could be considered daunting and potentially insurmountable, Wisconsin has taken a more optimistic approach. Industry experts, government leaders, and policymakers are working together to find solutions and tackle these challenges head-on. Two great examples of this are the program that you are attending now. The work of Customers First Coalition to bring together a broad network of stakeholders to discuss and learn about these issues is incredibly valuable to our industry. Continued dialogue and engagement is critical to achieving sustainable, long-term success during this time of growth and development. Also, this legislative session provides a great example as well. The bipartisan cooperation on proposals exploring and encouraging further nuclear generation in our state to address rising energy demand. The governor's budget and bills introduced in the legislature are proof that leaders on both sides of the aisle are open to innovative ideas and solutions to these challenges. I applaud Governor Evers and bill authors Senator Bradley and Representatives Stephan, Whitkey, and Sortwell for their foresight and proactive engagement on these important issues. During my tenure on the Commission, we've approved a number of generation construction projects. Often the nature of the relationship between the project developer or utility, known as the applicant, and the local community is relatively obvious from the record before us and is consistent with the applicant's filings and conduct throughout the proceedings. So before wrapping up my remarks, I do want to share several common themes and best practices from some of these prior successful projects that have resulted in positive outcomes. I'll try not to sound like a scoldy mom, but these observations do apply to developers and utilities alike in their interactions with host communities, each other, and the Commission. They are flexible across project type and location, and once again, should not be misconstrued as prejudgment or prescriptive advice, merely some observations or key considerations to keep in mind. First, it would be to prioritize community relations where data centers will be located. How do we do this? Trust is an important element of any relationship and can be built with and in host communities through open and honest interactions. Transparency and genuine active engagement are key to this. Communication is also key to building trust. That communication needs to be proactive, upfront, ongoing, and clear. I'm sure that the PSD staff is sick of hearing me say this, but use plain language when communicating with the public. The energy, utility, data center, and AI industries are confusing enough. The public should not have to understand high-density processing, edge computing, the PSC's statutory framework, and all of the acronyms in between to know when construction activities are occurring and if the data center development will impact their utility rates. Relatedly, create a clear, concise, and public-facing communications plan from the project's conceptual phase on and stick to it. Provide updates and information using clear language on various accessible platforms. And give local leaders and state agency contacts a heads up when an announcement is coming. As an example, PSD engineers reviewing data center projects should not first learn about changes to the project they are reviewing from reading Utility Dive. Listen and be responsive to community leaders, stakeholders, members of the public, etc., when they express concerns about the proposal or operations. Meet them where they are and attempt to make reasonable changes to show flexibility and compromise. So now we have trust and communication, but what else do we need? Community relations can also be strengthened by access and investment. Have a legitimate public presence, not a phantom or performative one, in the place that you are locating your center. Host public meetings, site tours, construction tours, facility tours. Make a difference by investing in the communities you want to build in. Hire local workers, preferably, like Mike said, from the skilled trades we're very lucky to have throughout Wisconsin. Volunteer, donate your time and your resources to community organizations that help those in need, and schools. Create tech hubs. We have a lot of good examples of things that have worked in Wisconsin thus far. And finally, please hold your project partners to the same level of effort on these relationship building endeavors. When you do have applications before the commission, especially novel ones, it's not up to us to make the case for you. And don't blame the PSD for not understanding. Nothing should be implied. If what you're trying to convey is not in the application or your response to a request, get it in the record. Clearly explain it and reply to questions with substantive answers. If there are challenges or issues with the existing framework, statutes, administrative rules, or policies, pick up the phone and have a discussion with someone at the PSD who can actually talk to you about it and potential solutions to the problems. Don't use it as an excuse for a weak filing. The industry is clearly undergoing substantial evolution and change. Therefore, don't go through the motions with a business as usual approach to data centers. Think critically and consider thoughtful and unique approaches. And regardless of which one you choose, the record needs a thorough justification of why the proposal is appropriate and reasonable. In closing, I want to reiterate the exciting potential that data centers offer in Wisconsin in terms of economic growth, workforce development, and technological advancement opportunities. I'm optimistic that with all of us working together, we will continue to develop creative strategies and solutions that uphold the tenets of the PSC's mission. Thank you again for attending the CFC Power Breakfast, and thank you to Kristen for your sound leadership of CFC and for your organizing this exciting event. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you to Chairperson Strand. It has been a joy to see you leading the PSC with determination and grace, and we appreciate your dedicated service. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to offer a warm welcome to our Customers First Coalition board members who are joining us today. Our current board members include, and we can bring the good energy in and don't hold your applause again. So our current board members include Rob Richard of the Wisconsin Electric Cooperative Association, Tim Heinrich of the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, Tom Content of the Citizens Utility Board of Wisconsin. There's Tom. Tom Hanrahan of WPPI Energy. Carrie Ann Renland of Madison Gas and Electric. There's Carrie Ann. Mike Bruning of the IBEW Local 2150, who you heard from. And Luke Fuller of Dairyland Power Cooperative. Thank you all for your leadership and service, and additional thanks to all of their board alternates and organizational representatives who actively participate in CFC and contribute their time, insights, and dedication. And I am adding special thanks to Susie and Spence and Luke for your help behind the scenes at this event as well. And now I'd like to welcome CFC Board Chairman Rob Richard to the stage to introduce our first panel.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rob Richard, President and CEO of the Wisconsin Electric Cooperative Association and Chairman of the Board for the Customers First Coalition. For those of you who were last year, you may recall we had a little bit of issue with the sign falling down. I can assure you this thing is going nowhere this year. There is tape everywhere, so that's good to know. It is my honor to introduce the moderator of our first panel today. Monica Bricky is the Chief Executive Officer of the Eau Claire Energy Cooperative. Under her leadership, the cooperative has embraced innovation while continuing to provide reliable, member-focused service to rural communities across western Wisconsin. She is a strong advocate for energy resilience, economic development, and advancing cooperative values in today's rapidly evolving energy landscape. Monica brings a practical, grounded approach to solving energy challenges, making her the ideal person to lead this morning's discussion on data centers and energy use. Joining Monica on the panel this morning will be Tyler Hibner with the Energy Market Development Team at Google, Robert Garvin, Executive Vice President, External Affairs at WEC Energy Group, and David Reamer, Chief Commercial Officer with National Grid Renewables. Please give a warm welcome to Monica and our panelists.
Test the lapel. There we go. All right. I think Rob just said all those nice things about me because I serve on his board. So, no, I'm just kidding. Thanks, Rob. All right. Get our panelists situated here. All right. Good morning. I'm happy to be moderating this panel and kicking us off today. As we all know, energy demand in our country is growing with the addition of new manufacturing, electric vehicles, and the topic we're discussing today, data centers. And utilities across the country and here in Wisconsin are grappling with how do we respond to these growing energy needs. And we're getting approached with inquiries about building data centers in our communities. Today I hope to chat with the panel of experts here to my right about the process, implementation, and some of the more technical on-the-ground aspects of how data centers are changing Wisconsin's energy landscape. So I'd first like to give each of you an opportunity to introduce yourselves and the organization you represent, and then the unique perspective your organization brings to the issue. So Tyler, you want to start us out?
Thanks. Now can you hear me? Perfect. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me, Kristen, and Customers First. It's great to be back. I was a board member of Customers First for about 7 years when I was executive director at Renew Wisconsin, so it's always great to be back here. I'm with Google. I have been with Google for coming up on about a year. Before that, I was a commissioner at the commission, a few years after Bert was. So who's heard of Google? Has anybody used a Google product already today? Yeah. So we're a company that has a lot of different products. We have about 9 different products that 1 billion different people use around the world every month. So we've been growing as a company ever since we started, and we continue to grow. Search, Gmail, and Google Docs. YouTube is a huge growth for our company. And we also have a Google Cloud division that over time has been kind of a driver in really making computing more efficient for a lot of customers. So back in the day, and the PSC may still have a server room. I can't remember, but I remember working in the state 2009, 10, 11, and there's just a room, and you just hear the fans coming out and running. Every business basically had one of those rooms full of computers and servers, keeping track of email, et cetera. As those kind of services have mostly migrated to these cloud type of architectures, companies like Google really build these super efficient data centers. So as far as like the overall amount of computing power, there was a survey done from 2010 to 2018 where the computing power went up 550-fold, but the energy use only went up 6%, because it's super efficient to do this type of data chunking in a data center as compared to 150 million little server rooms. That said, the artificial intelligence and computing power for the applications that we're looking to do in the future is a little bit of a different story, and it's something we at Google are super excited about. We're working on scientific breakthroughs, and in fact, we had Google employees win the Nobel Prize because of some inventions that they made using AI to help fold proteins and develop new medicines and products. And we're really excited about solutions across healthcare, education, business, and beyond. So I talked a little bit about efficiency. Some of the things Google's really trying to work on, kind of bucketed in three categories. First is accelerating innovation and investment in advanced energy generation. So we've made commitments and we're looking to build advanced geothermal. We've made commitments around small modular reactors. We're looking at carbon capture. Some of these technologies that are not exactly least cost today, but we want to pull them forward to become hopefully the least cost, clean, firm solutions of tomorrow. Some of the really important aspects to that are kind of continued certainty around tax credits at the federal level and really federal support of some of these emerging technologies. The second big area is optimizing use of the existing grid and unlocking construction of new transmission that's in the public interest. And then the third thing is investing in our labor force. And so just last week, we made an announcement to invest into the Electrical Training Alliance to help support an increase in the electric workforce in the next 5 years. The overall goal of the program is 100,000 new electrical workers and 30,000 new apprentices within 5 years. So those are some of the big initiatives we have going on at Google around energy. So pass it on.
Thanks, Tyler. My name is Bert Garvin. I'm at WEC Energy Group, starting my 15th year here. It's great to be back in Madison. It's for a friendly but yet awkward family reunion with many of the people I've worked with over the last 3 decades. But I'm delighted to be here. I direct all our regulatory and GR efforts at the federal, state, and local level for WEC Energy Group. We're the parent of We Energies and WPS, which serves about 60% of the electric load in the state. And as the chair mentioned, our electricity demand for the last 20 years was very flat, and now we're seeing levels that we haven't seen in my career at all, going from relatively flat to 4 to 5% annualized growth, and that brings a lot of challenges both for the regulators as well as us as the regulated utility. But there's something happening here. I'm not sure if it's the cold weather or our access to the Great Lakes, or what I think as a policy person, we have a very constructive and balanced regulatory environment compared to some of the other generation markets in the country, but we're seeing a lot of interest in Wisconsin. In our service territory, we've had 2 big announcements from Microsoft and Cloverleaf that are really reshaping the energy landscape in southeast Wisconsin. And I know our colleagues at Alliant had an announcement recently with Meta. So it's happening all across the state. With regard to Microsoft, there's been a lot of media focus on that since they made their formal announcement back in March of 2024. $3.3 billion investment, 1,800 megawatts, 2,300 construction jobs, and 2,000 permanent jobs. Also, more recently, we've had Cloverleaf, which, about a year later, they came into the picture, or not a year later, in January, and they plan to develop a very large data center in Port Washington with an initial load of, conservatively 1 gig over the 1,700 acres they've purchased. And they're they're a developer of high energy consumption sites, primarily data centers. We don't know who the ultimate owner will be, but we've worked very closely with Microsoft and Cloverleaf in developing our tariffs, which we just filed at the end of March, and I'm happy to talk about more in detail during the Q&A. But I think the arrangement, we've worked very closely with them on 2 tariffs. One's for very large customers, and another one is, we call it our bespoke generation tariff. And the concept, they sort of work in tandem. You have to be a very, very large customer, 500 megawatts or bigger. And you also, and when I say in tandem, you also have to execute what we call a PCA, or a purchase cancel agreement, or a service agreement, that to reliably serve these new loads. And that includes, signing up for at least one generation resource. So we're it's been a very, a lot of the other states that we've seen, the process is just you make a confidential filing. The tact we took with Microsoft and others has been fairly transparent in terms of what we're trying to do to promote fairness, because a lot of on the GR side, the question I get is, we're really delighted with this development. We don't want our customers paying for it. It's been very clear, not just for regulators, but in the GR space as well. But the key elements of the VLC is you have to be 500 megawatts. You have to subscribe to one or more generation resources, which was a big commitment by these companies. The terms vary. For wind and solar, it's 20 years. For dispatchable assets, it's for the life of the asset. Fixed ROEs, the revenue and costs that we're proposing. Again, this is proposed, so I know. I can't. I know the judges are here. I can just talk conceptually because it requires commission approval. But the revenues and the costs were recovered by our tariff would be excluded from rate case and earnings sharing mechanisms. That's what we've proposed. And also, we have some protections in the VLC tariff for early termination. So if the customer leaves early, they would replay, at book value, they pay for that asset. Then on the bespoke, again, that was a key part of these commercial negotiations, where the companies taking part as large customers would have to buy into some generation. They have to subscribe and agree to pay their fair share of those costs. And those projects vary. They could be renewables, batteries, dispatchable resources like natural gas. And we're really proud of the work we've done with the data centers, because we think all customers in Wisconsin are going to benefit from a more diversified, all of the above generation portfolio. And I can talk a little bit more in detail about those resources. But delighted to be here and look forward to participating in the discussion.
Thank you. David?
Hi, David Reamer. I'm with National Grid Renewables. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer. National Grid Renewables started out as an IPP in Minnesota about 20 years ago. We were farmer-founded. Our founder and gentleman that got kicked off the company 20 years ago was approached by a wind developer. And the wind developer wanted to sort of pit him against other landowners adjacent with respect to incentives to bring higher payments to turbines and land. And the gentleman's name is Noel Ron, and he told the developer, no, not going to do that. Not going to pit myself against my neighbor, and it's more important what happens to me in the coffee shop than what happens in the boardroom. Noel happened to be a Wall Street executive as well, and so he knew business. And he said no to that developer and turned around to my partner and said, we'll just do it ourselves. And at that point in time, we literally did not know the difference between a telephone line and a power line 20 years ago. But today it's a different story. National Grid Renewables today, we were acquired, it's sort of our 2.0 about 7 years ago by National Grid out of London. And professionalized us into a developer. And we operate from Appalachia out to the Rockies, down to Texas. And so today, hopefully, can bring a different perspective of what we're seeing in other markets, what we're seeing with respect to data centers and offtake with them. We started out, like anyone else, in Minnesota selling to the utilities, right? And that was the business as an IPP. And our biggest customer is was Excel. And then that shifted. And Amazon and Microsoft are now our biggest customers today through virtual power purchase agreements right now. But we see that trend shifting as well. So from a little Wisconsin hometown context, we have a project just north of here in Portage, a 250 megawatt solar facility, and the off-taker is Microsoft in coordination with the data center at the old Foxconn facility. So we did a VPPA with Microsoft. We're happy that that's obviously moving forward. And as we saw this trend of data centers, just like everyone else is with this growth, we saw our business changing. And so we made some strategic adjustments. And maybe that's the reason why I got tapped on the shoulder to come down and talk with you today about sort of how we're changing. We started adjacent data center development next to our projects. We had a unique perspective where we're in the queues and we had the power, the rights to the power and access to the grid across the states in which we operate. And we found interest from the customers that I just mentioned, the hyperscale data center customers, that they wanted to talk to us about access to our power and adjacency to it. How that looks today and how that looks tomorrow is different from every state. And we can walk through that. That's my sales guy. Sorry. And we can walk through that today. One of the things that I wanted to end just at least my introduction with, and back to how we got started as a farmer-friendly developer, and Commissioner Strand mentioned it in her opening remarks, it's community first. So we are a passionate community-first developer, which I believe actually separates us from the majority of the IPPs that are in the market today. We've got a dedicated team that does nothing but go out early. We're very, very proud to be early in the in the communities we develop, and we get told no, and we leave. If they don't want us, we'll move on. And then local flavor again. We have not initiated a wind development in the state of Wisconsin in over a decade. We can't find the right community that wants to support it, and that's just a reality. But we have done solar. We are doing batteries and solar in the state. And as we look at the access to power, which is what this new generation of customers want, the speed to power is the key that we believe renewables still have a place in conjunction with gas. We're not zealots by any way, shape, or form. We believe that a resource mix of all the above and below is what's going to work. And that's the message we're taking to the constituents in which we operate our projects.
Great. David, we're going to stay with you. Help us set the stage and understand what different types of data centers are out there, how much energy are they using, and how are they getting access to that energy?
That's a really that would appear to be a really simple question, but not necessarily an easy answer. I would break it down in sort of a few different buckets if you'll give me a minute to sort of walk through this. It starts out real simple as sort of retail, wholesale, and then hyperscale. That's the way we look at it. And then when you break those down, retail can be something like an enterprise, a company itself having its own data centers, potentially located in their facility, obviously moving on to the cloud. As Tyler mentioned, that's the trend, not going to be the trend. That is the trend. And that can be anywhere from, maybe 500 kilowatts would be a large retail. And then from a wholesale standpoint, that gets broken down into an enterprise. Maybe it's a little bit bigger, and they have it themselves, and they own it. It's like maybe Epic would be an example of that, where they've got their own data center out in Verona. And then you have co-location data centers, where companies like Digital Realty or QTS build data centers specifically like a hotel, right? So other companies are going and interfacing with them, and AWS obviously had that model as well to service other needs with respect to people that wanted to move their data centers to a centralized location. So that's sort of jacks for openers. And then where it really starts to get complicated with a lot of acronyms and other things that we talked about earlier were the workloads. So now when you look at the workloads of these data centers, and that's where it breaks down into size and language learning and inference and crypto mining, edge computing, all aspects of that break it down. But back to the initial question of the size, we see the smaller stuff moving to co-located. A co-located hotel today, a big co-located hotel facility by QTS, about 250 megawatts. Their biggest one is in Richmond, Virginia. Digital Realty is in Chicago. Their Lakeside Center, there is about 150 megawatts. So they've got multiple tenants inside their locations. And then where the trend is, and what the news you hear is from Google and others, is the move to the hyperscale, like Microsoft's doing in your state. Those sizes can move to a gigawatt, right? That's sort of the goal that we shoot for with respect to any type of co-development that we're putting alongside of our generation. It's phased. So initially, when we start with those, we'll coordinate with the local utility with an ESA of anywhere between 120 to 200 megawatts to start. That's just day one to get it going forward, and that might be a couple-year process. And as we're entitling the land and bringing forward the data center design in partnership with the fiber, the water, the permits, all aspects, we're clearly utilizing the grid to get there. The second phase usually scales up to about 500 megawatts on a hyperscale, at least for the projects that we're moving forward. And that's where our co-location, which is still grid connected, but at the LMP. It's right on the node of where they're going in. So you're looking at MISO, the combination of what happens at that load and generation coming together at the same time. In Texas, that's what they do every day on a private use network basis. In fact, they can actually flow the power both ways, to the facility, to the load, and then back to the grid, and require that flexibility in a private use network. So those are that's an example of how they're doing it otherwise. And then ultimately, we see it going up to a gig, and this is where it gets interesting, and with policy changes in certain states and other states moving in certain directions with respect to tariffs and how they're going to be coordinated, is as you move into the larger scale in a few years from now, we see an opportunity where some of the renewables, in conjunction with gas, would go behind the meter to even coordinate and save ratepayers, move that burden back onto load, and you need the gas for the capacity. The capacity is the term LCOC has come up more in the last 6 months than I can tell you 6 years ago, 16 years ago, I never actually heard the acronym LCOC, lowest cost of capacity. That is now the new mark, and I'm sure that, Bert, you guys are dealing with that every day. So that gives you kind of a breakdown of the sizes that we're at least seeing in the market.
Yeah, thank you. So, we'll go to Bert next. You talked in your opening remarks about the large projects in your area, in your service territory. Can you tell us when a customer like this approaches you, what are some of the guiding principles that you as a utility use to determine how to proceed with that organization?
Thank you. Well, I would say...
So, gotta hold it pretty close, too.
Flashing red. Sorry, David. All right, does this work? Yeah. I would say when we met with Microsoft and Cloverleaf, I would say we had guiding principles, but I would describe them more as our priorities. And the top one was, how are we meeting the needs of the particular customer? I mean, David mentioned the number one thing for all the hyperscalers is speed to market, reliability, and cost. Those are the three criteria in terms of a principle or a priority, making sure we did that. Then for us, as the utility, it was fairness and protection to other customers. Because as I mentioned earlier, this will not work if there's a perception, regulatory, politically, commercially, that other customers are paying for these new high-energy users. And we really worked hard at that. And also, with regard to the whole system, maintaining reliability was a key priority. and then minimizing risk to the utility. I mean, we earn a fair return on our assets, and the concern with any utility, not just WEC Energy Group, is you don't want those type of large users affecting your credit rating that would, in a negative way, that would impact cost to customers. And then the last thing I'd say as a principle is just continuing to facilitate more economic development in Wisconsin. As we looked at it, I mean, this is fantastic that utilities in our state are getting these type of interest, this type of interest from hyperscalers. Now, these two are public, but there's plenty of non-disclosures I've executed with regards to other interests that you get when you see, hey, what's going on here in Wisconsin? Why is Microsoft coming here? Why is Cloverleaf setting up a large, we have very suitable sites, like I mentioned, good infrastructure, and a predictable regulatory environment, which are all attributes that I think have helped us. So I guess that's in a nutshell what I would say.
So we've talked a little bit about how, data center customers have come to the utility. Have any of you experienced where the utility actually approaches the data center customer? Any experience with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah. I mean, I'm not on our commercial team, but I know that there's like a never-ending series of meetings with utilities and other third parties that are bringing ideas to us, right? So I can definitely answer that question. To kind of loop back to some of the principles and guiding principles, we've been involved in a number of regulatory proceedings where we have data centers or where we have sort of announced that we might be interested, and these types of same questions have come up. It's like access to the power, the speed and scale, and how are you going to structure agreements that protect the existing customers out there. So we've been working, we have a three-legged stool as regulators. We have a sort of a five-legged stool as it relates to the principles we've kind of put forth in some of these regulatory proceedings as an industry, but in a lot of these customer advocates, other large customers have joined these types of settlements. So I'll go through the five that I have on my five-legged stool. First is non-discriminatory rate treatment. So today you don't have a rate class for your steel mills versus your paper mills versus other large loads, right? So similarly, we don't think there should be rate classes for, quote, data centers, maybe a very large customer type of approach. But anybody that kind of uses the grid in that way should be treated in a non-discriminatory fashion. So that's principle one. The second, though, is long-term commitments. So one of the challenges we're seeing is there's a lot of speculation in this market. There's a lot of really high projections of how much load is going to come to these states, how much load is going to come to these regions, MISO, PJM. I mean, they have these load forecasts that are extremely large. We're trying to figure out how do we get to real. And we think the way you get to real is make people sign a piece of paper. Now that sounds crazy. Why would Google want to sign a 12 or a 15-year commitment to buy power that our business, we may be in front of our business signing up for these commitments. Maybe something happens and the load doesn't show up, but the alternative is you have to push those costs onto other customers. If that generation or transmission asset is built and then you as a large load customer don't show up, there's really no recourse for the other customers. And so this is something we've come around to, recognizing that you need these long-term commitments. And then the third is minimum contribution. So, for example, in Indiana, there's a settlement where these large load customers have agreed to pay 75% of their demand charges, whether they use the power or not. And they've agreed to do that for 12 to 15 years. So those are really significant, huge dollar amounts. But what that does is it focuses and forces the load forecast to get right. Because some of these utilities in Indiana, they're a 5 gigawatt utility with 5 to 10 gigawatts of prospective data center load. And how do you figure out what's real in that? So the fourth is if you're going to sign up to make minimum contributions, what happens if your speculative data center company goes under, right? So the fourth is collateral. You need to actually have the money, either in the bank, a parent guarantee, a surety bond, something that if you've said you're going to use this power, you don't use the power, and then you walk away or go bankrupt, there's some entity behind that that's going to make sure that those bills get paid. And then the fifth is fair and transparent exit fees or transferability. So sometimes your business model does change, and maybe another data center or large load customer can kind of step into the commitments you've made. So we think it's really important that you can kind of transfer that obligation that you might have signed up for to the next customer that might find, maybe you built a data center elsewhere or a growing load elsewhere because of customers you have. Somebody can come in and backfill what you had signed up for. So those are the 5 legs of the stool.
Great, thanks. I think I'll stay with you, Tyler. So at Google, switching gears a little bit, how do you reconcile Google's clean energy goals with the significant amount of generation needed to power these data centers? Like, what comes first, securing reliable power or meeting the clean energy goals?
I don't think it's what comes first. I think it's figuring out what works in the area that we're looking to site. And we are growing, and we're looking at data centers in a lot of places and are making a lot of announcements, it seems like, every quarter for sure. Part of this driver for Google, which we do have very ambitious clean energy goals, just to kind of set the table, we have since 2017 annually matched the amount of energy our data centers use with renewable energy, mainly power purchase agreements, signing up. So it's kind of, there's the rec market, and the way we actually do it is power purchase agreements in the market where we have data centers. So for example, in MISO, we have a large facility in Council Bluffs, Iowa. So we're sort of matching our consumption at that Iowa data center with energy purchases, PPAs within MISO. So it's not, RECs in Texas or something like that sort of don't have any fungibility with our actual operations. 5 years ago, we kept that goal, but made an even more ambitious goal to do that on an hourly basis. So throughout all the hours of the year, we're looking at, within MISO, for example, our data center in Iowa, how much energy is it using every hour, and how do we match that with carbon-free energy in that hour, and keep doing it for all 8,760 hours of the year. It's a very hard goal. So one of the things for us is going to where the clean energy is. So you'll see a lot of our announcements is like going to places where we can either procure clean energy directly, where we have agreements, where other developers have kind of enabled these types of arrangements, co-location, et cetera. But the other thing we're doing is trying to pull new technologies forward. So advanced geothermal in the Southwest, small modular reactors, which hopefully can kind of be deployed all throughout the country if we can get them reliable and at cost. So those are kind of some of the initiatives that we're pursuing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Bert, David, anything to add in that regard?
I would just add the perspective of, Tyler mentioned load forecasting, just to give you, as I said, I'd bring some of the pieces of other areas where we developed. In Texas, right now it's about an 85 gigawatt system, okay, 85 gigs. MISO, where you're at, and the adjacent states obviously associated with it, about 135. The Texas forecast for 2030 through ERCOT is 150 gigawatts. So that increase is not sustainable. So they've took it down, right? So ERCOT went through an analysis. How much of this is real? The main interconnecting transmission owners there are Encore and AEP. And today, Texas moves quick with respect to getting projects online, both load and generation. Probably the fastest anywhere in the nation today. But it has stalled because of supply chain initiative, just engineering prowess with so much in front of them. So they brought it down to a manageable number of 120 gigawatts, which is not manageable, right? Market forecasts say it's somewhere between 120 and 110. But that's the type of load forecast that people are experiencing. And that is actually dominated mainly by data center growth. They have a lot of crypto mining in Texas initially, but most of the new growth is associated with hyperscale facilities coming in. To give you the other perspective, so I mentioned that it's 135 for MISO. The capacity market in MISO, to show you how short and how close we are on the margin with respect to capacity costs. So 2 years ago, the only zone in MISO that was at cone, the cost of new entry, was Michigan. That was it. And it went up, zone 6, to cone 2 years ago. Everything else was around 7 cents a kilowatt month. The recent MISO auction went from 7 cents to peak summer, to 135, and it went to 666 a kilowatt month. So it hit cone across the northern region. So back to predicting forecast of matching load and generation, I see that as one of the major challenges in front of us here. Love to get your perspective, Bert.
That's a great segue. So if we could kind of talk about, continue on that, and then talk about the other challenges that you might be running into.
Sure. Well, to really be a geek, let me make a plug for Zone 2, which is where we are in the MISO footprint. You know, a lot of the things we focus on with our customers and with our generation planners is how much energy do you need, when is it needed, and where is it needed. And most of the discussion we have with the hyperscalers is when is it needed, because that ends up dictating what your generation choices are going to be. Because if you could make a 30-year commitment, you'd start talking more about nuclear or SMRs, which we're all looking at as an industry. But if you're trying to get speed to market, you've got to have a combination package. What are their interests? What are their clean energy goals? What supply mix do they want? And they're varied. I mean, there's different, you're going to need dispatchable resources if you're in the data center business. So we're working very close, and that's part of what the bespoke tariff construct was about, was meeting the customer's need, being a key part of our future generation planning to get, whether it's short duration batteries, renewables, and dispatchable resources. That's what we're spending a lot of time on. And the other thing I would add is the related transmission work, because that's as important, the work that ATC does, as what we do on the generation side. If you're looking at a site, you got to make sure you got the power delivery system to get those electrons to where you're developing your site. And that's critical, working with them, in terms of the type of upgrades you're going to need to meet the requested energy capacity demands of the future.
So that was we talked a lot about the challenges here in the last few minutes. Could we switch gears and talk a little bit more about the opportunities that these projects bring? I don't know, Tyler, if you want to start us out and go down the line.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, from a local perspective, Google and I think all of our peers in the data center industry we try to be really good community players and community actors. We call it a social license to operate. So as I mentioned, we've been in Council Bluffs, Iowa since 2007 is when we broke ground on construction. I think there's been a few years we haven't been building something, but it's been more or less constant construction since then. So you build the first building, it's going well, you build another, your business is growing, you build another. So that's the type of, it's been a growing business. So you think, electricians, cement pourers, these kind of things. Well, some of those workers do come and go, but some, especially on the electrician side, you could be employed at a job site for 10, 15 years, and that is not uncommon with some of these facilities, at least in our experience in Iowa. So a lot of job creation, a lot of economic benefit, tax-based benefit. From the energy side, we're a very high load factor customer, so it really kind of spreads the costs of building out the transmission and the generation system across a lot of kilowatt hours and megawatt hours, which generally is a good thing and puts downward pressure on rates over the long run. Some of the other opportunities within energy, I think, at least as Google's looking about it, is how do we continue to kind of pull and accelerate some of these ideas that people have been talking about for a long time, and how do we scale them? So I've talked about geothermal and SMRs, and we're excited about that. But grid enhancing technologies, how do we get the most out of the transmission grid that we have? Energy efficiency and weatherization. We as a company are making investments in our communities to help folks use energy more efficiently in their own homes. Demand response, both at our data center facilities, which we're pushing upstream to all the programmers and chip designers of the grid is a constraint now. Getting power is a constraint. How flexible can we be? How many hours a year can we sort of move our workloads out of a certain spot or just bring it down so that we can kind of fit into the grid that exists and the power capacity that exists that's there today, as well as demand response off-site. And so I know these are things that have been talked about a long time, but how do we really use this moment to bring some of those faster to speed to market ideas forward? And then, like I said at the beginning, from AI perspective, we're very excited. I know when I first came to Google and people talk about AI, it's like, wow, we're really going to do all this just to help our kids, cheat on their homework? Like, that doesn't seem like a good answer. But, at Google, we really are investing, and we have blogs about, the investments we're making in France around solving cancer, investments, like I said, in kind of fundamental scientific breakthroughs in research. And I know we just have a lot of people just very excited about what's problems we can solve, societal problems we can solve with this newfound computing power that we have. So,
before we talk about opportunities, I did want to hit on one challenge I wanted to identify is the pace. This is, we're obviously competing as a traditional utility for this type of load, and you have to move with a purpose. And are we going to continue our accelerated generation approach? We're doing things that we traditionally, and all utilities are doing this, in terms of locking in long-time lead equipment, locking in pricing, shortening construction timelines. This is testing the transmission providers, the generation providers, distribution. I didn't want to leave that off the table because it's required the utility business model. We have to, and we have to work with our regulators on a quicker pace. But in terms of the opportunities, I would still say, with the diverse fleet we have, this is a very good place to locate data centers, and you're seeing it, and you'll see more of it. But it's going to require a lot of teamwork between all the stakeholders in Wisconsin to get acceptance of this, and that's why the policy point, I will close, is it's still about fairness and making sure that these large hyperscalers are paying their fair share, and the other customers are getting the benefit of a more diversified fleet that it's going to help bring to Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'd also start with sort of the challenge that I forgot is just the current policies. The ambiguity around the policies today is really sort of put a little bit of a pause button on our traditional renewable side of our business. But we also believe that ambiguity is where the opportunity will arise as a lot of smaller developers fall out or queue positions become available. We're fortunately in a position where we'll be able to evaluate some of those opportunities. When I reflect on some of the comments earlier, and I think about Wisconsin as why people are coming here and the opportunity, even though there's no naturally occurring fuels in the state with respect to gas or coal, there still is an opportunity here, we believe, for an ultimate mix of resources. And one of my key engineers, Randy Porter, who's been in the industry forever, and any of you at MISO would probably recognize his name if there's some of you in the room. Randy consistently says, go to Wisconsin. And, as our development team, we push him, get some things going in Wisconsin. And why go to Wisconsin? There's capacity here. There's capacity in the system. And that's a very unique perspective. You don't have a lot of trapped curtailment in the system. So from a developer standpoint, adding new generation to the state is something that we evaluate often, Zone 2, Zone 1, all of it in general. And we see opportunity actually in the state for new generation with a combination of solar, gas, storage. And if we need to move into other resources, be it SMRs, geothermal, we're a power developer. And if the market's dictating that we need to bring forward natural gas to complement and proliferate renewables, we will. That's how we'll operate and take it forward along with the utility partners in the state. So I see blue skies here in Wisconsin.
Great.
Red skies maybe.
Okay, we're thinking about your questions, but I'm going to just ask any other final remarks before we open it up to a couple of audience questions. Anything that we didn't ask you that you wanted to make sure you stated? You good? All right. Any questions from the audience? for our panel? Way in the back there?
Yes, Dave Barrett, Oklahoma County.
I'm going to give you the microphone, Dave.
Crypto mining.
Crypto mining?
Microphone for WisconsinEye. WisconsinEye is recording and they like to.
All righty. Dave Barrett, Oklahoma County. You mentioned crypto mining. That is a new word to me. What is crypto mining, and where is crypto mining here in the Midwest?
So what I was referring to is Bitcoin mining or cryptocurrency mining. It's new to me as well, but it is real and it is taking load. There's no doubt about it. To give you a perspective of the load, I have heard, I haven't witnessed it, but I have heard that crypto mining can take place with your Tesla sitting in its garage. You can actually install and have your car mined for cryptocurrency overnight. That's the smallest aspect of a crypto mine. One of the larger aspects of a crypto mine is we ended up selling a 120 megawatt wind farm directly to a crypto miner. And they're going to go adjacent. We don't own the project anymore. We did. It was in West Texas, SPP, Texas. And the project was curtailed. We mentioned before about the lack of curtailment in Wisconsin. This project was curtailed to the point where a 120 megawatt project was probably pushing about 18 megawatts a day onto the grid. That's how curtailed it was in that region of SPP. So for us, it became a very difficult asset to run. And this cryptocurrency miner bought it from us flat out, and they're co-locating a cryptocurrency facility adjacent to it. So that's crypto mining, Bitcoin mining, in a sense.
So
Not endorsing it, just giving you what I know about it.
Okay, so then you're saying that what we know as cryptocurrency is investing in the energy development here in the Midwest?
Very much so. Energy development, co-location, and becoming a very active load. I know that specifically in North Dakota, in Zone 1 MISO, multiple crypto miners are active today. I'm not sure if you guys deal with them as customers, Bert, or they're around. Sometimes you know about them, sometimes you don't.
No comment. All right, any other questions?
I have a question if there's no other audience questions right now. David, you mentioned virtual power plants at the beginning, and I'm just wondering if, I tend to get a lot of questions about SMRs, and then also a question I've been getting a lot recently is on virtual power plants. I'm hoping you could explain what they are and how they're in the mix here.
Sure. So as an IPP, we will own and operate the power plants in the in the states and jurisdictions and RTOs where we develop them. And in order for us to bring those online, what we typically like to do is secure an offtake partner. We do that regularly with the utilities in the regions where we operate. But in addition to that, large corporate industrial buyers want to have access to the renewable energy credits for a certain segment of our fleet. And in the example I mentioned, Microsoft worked with us, and we signed a virtual power purchase agreement. It's really a financial settlement. So we provide the power to them at a price. We settle it at a hub, which in this case is Minnesota Hub, MinHub MISO, at a price. And for every megawatt, they will pay us a fee. And then for what we need to give them in return is the renewable energy credit associated with the megawatt that we settle with. So it's a contract for difference is one way to describe it that might be more understandable.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? A couple over here. Oh.
So you've been incredibly eloquent and cooperative as a panel, but I have a question. Mr. Reamer is an IPP and Bert represents utility. You talked about the pros and cons as a state of trying to get more IPPs versus having more owned and operated by utilities.
Go ahead.
We see WEC as a partner. our potential partner. We haven't transacted with them directly, but by all means, as our business is an IPP, just to give you some clarity, we develop projects. Sometimes we get them right to the point of construction ready, and then we'll sell them to a utility. There's even a point where we would take that project all the way to the end of construction and then sell it to a utility. So that's just part of our business model. And then we do, use the ability to operate a power plant and serve into the market either on a wholesale or through a virtual power purchase agreement. So it's serendipitous with respect to the way that we bring power to the grid and the way that obviously a utility would.
Yeah, I would say our experience with IPPs over the last 25 years has been mixed with regard to impact on customers. And I would say we're more energy realists. We have, we work with a lot of different developers. In fact, Invenergy's built $5 billion worth of generation infrastructure. So we continue to look for what's the most economic, cost-effective solution for our customers. But I would say the history we've had with IPPs has been very mixed for customers.
Okay. Will we get one more question? I saw a hand over here. Yeah, go ahead. So forecasting, did you hear the question?
Yeah, the question was around load forecasting, Don. Yeah, this is one of those areas where we've really kind of changed our tune, I think, over the past 12 to 18 months as a company, and recognized that, like, historically, if utility comes into their planning process, an integrated resource plan or whatever is, appropriate in that jurisdiction, it's their job to kind of say, here's our residential load growth, here's our business load growth. They hire some consultants, do some studies, et cetera. But when you bring on this data center load, Bert's not going to have the insights into a particular data center. How fast can that data center get the chips and the servers inside of that building? Those are other gates that, the data center has to really clear themselves. And there's a lot of competitive sensitivity around those types of decisions, obviously. So now he's responsible for developing a load forecast, and our load is so large, but we're the ones really in control of how fast we're going to ramp. So there's conversations around how fast to ramp from an infrastructure perspective. But sort of getting the load forecast right is why we sort of developed this five-legged stool, is because we actually think the risk needs to shift away from the utility and the utility's customers in forecasting our load and onto the data center industry and ourselves as a customer. Because we're the ones that are bringing the uncertainty to the table. We're the ones that have, we can get chips this fast or we can build a building this fast. And so that's really kind of the design behind this proposal, is that the risk needs to shift to us and the obligations to deliver need to shift to us as well. And that's why we've sort of come to this realization that you need to bring significant capital, sign up for minimum commitments. And what we hope that does, sort of in an umbrella sense from the top down, is kind of drive to this reality of, okay, I had this idea to build a big data center, but am I willing to sign up for about $1 billion worth of commitments over the next 12 years? And if I'm not really willing to sign up for those kind of commitments, then maybe I'm not actually real, or I don't have the right customer behind me at this point in time. So we're trying to drive that speculation out of the market because of the thing David mentioned in ERCOT. Okay, going from 85 to 150, like, how is that going to be possible? It really is not. And so you got to figure out, how do I knock the folks out that aren't real so that I can focus on reliably serving the folks that are real. So it's a real challenge. I don't think we have an answer today, but I think we're trying to help drive at solutions and open to others' ideas too. So.
All right, thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Tyler, Bert, and David.
All right, well, thank you so much again to our first panel. Before we go to our networking break, I would like everybody please join me in thanking our generous event sponsors. Our hyperscale sponsors for this event are Frederickson Law Firm, right up front here. Justin, thank you so much. And the Wisconsin Counties Association. All the power sponsors are ATC, the WUA, Alliant Energy, and Stafford and Rosenbaum. Our baseload power sponsors are Focus on Energy, TC Energy, Boardman Clark, and Envision by Amplify Health. So thank you again to all of our event sponsors. And now we'll take about a 15-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10:15. Thank you. The best part, we appreciate it, but we have the best, another best coming up. Our second panel is titled Regulatory Policy and Consumer Implications of Data Center Energy Use. So I think we're going to get a lot of different perspectives on this panel. And please welcome Tim Heinrich, the Vice Chairman of the Board for the Customers First Coalition, to introduce our next panel.
Thanks, Kristen. Good morning, everybody. As Kristen said, my name is Tim. I represent the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, and we are the trade association for the 81 communities, cities, and villages across the state that own and operate their own electric utility. And we have the pleasure of serving about 300,000 customers in the state of Wisconsin, and we're really pleased to be able to be part of the Customers First Coalition. MEUW is a founding member of CFC, and we certainly are glad to be part of it. I want to take a minute just as Vice Chair of the Board to acknowledge the great work that Kristen does on behalf of the Customers First Coalition. We're all very grateful for her work on our behalf, and you know, those of you who haven't yet, please tune into the podcast. She does a fantastic job spreading education about all of the industry issues, and she's just a wonderful asset for Customers First, so we're very glad to do that. But my real responsibility this morning is to introduce our panel, and our panel is going to be led by Commissioner Nieto, and it includes 4 panelists, Tom Content, who is Executive Director of the Citizens Utilities Board of Wisconsin, Terrell Zeke, who is Regional Vice President of Energy Policy at Xcel Energy, Carrie Valley, Senior Director of State Policy and Strategy at MISO, and Delaney Brewer, who's an attorney at Frederickson and Byron. And so our moderator today is Commissioner Nieto. Commissioner Nieto was appointed to the Public Service Commission by Governor Evers just last year. She's been a thoughtful and pragmatic leader on the commission, and has a strong focus on customer protection, energy reliability, and ensuring fairness for all customers in Wisconsin. Prior to her appointment, as all of you know, she was the administrator for the Division of Digital Access, Consumer, and Environmental Affairs at the Commission. She advanced a number of initiatives on broadband, utility customer service, and energy equity. And those of us who've had the pleasure of working with Commissioner Nieto over the years know that she's always had an open door policy and a willingness to work with all stakeholders to solve problems. And we're really pleased to have her moderating our discussion today. So please join me in welcoming Commissioner Nieto. I'm supposed to give this to Kristen.
Now it's working? All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you, Kristen, for today's breakfast. This is a great turnout, and as I have been looking out across the room over the morning, just a very impressive room full of very key people to be discussing these topics. So kudos to you, and thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I will start. Chairperson Strand gave a disclaimer this morning in Cindy's absence, and so I get to go second, and I get to say ditto, if that covers it. Okay, great. This morning's discussion is not meant to prejudge anything we have before us at the commission here. I will say this morning's first panel did a great job of setting the stage for us. We are going to pick off essentially where they left off, and we're going to focus on some of the same themes around essentially what is potentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity around the data center boom, and opportunities for whether it's economic development in the state of Wisconsin, more efficient use of utility systems, more efficient use of the grid, and then talk about the challenges and potential risks as well. And our focus is on policy and on guiding principles and priorities to help capture those opportunities properly, while at the same time protecting existing customers from some of the potential costs and risks that we'll discuss. So I will say I think this question is really interesting because it gets to some of the intersection of what I think Chair Strand teed up this morning, that nexus of economic development and then other aspects of the public interest, and a balancing of those so that the end result is no harm to the public. And that's kind of the whole point of economic development as well. It's a public interest goal in and of itself. And hopefully there is a net benefit to customers and to the public of data centers joining Wisconsin utility systems. I will say this is a complex topic, and luckily we have the right experts here to discuss it this morning. And we will start with some introductions. So panelists, would you please first tell us a little bit about yourselves and your connection to data centers? We'll start with Terrell and go down the line here.
Good morning, and thank you. And Kristen, thanks for the invite on the panel this morning. I'm Terrell Zeke, the Regional Vice President of Regulatory Policy for Xcel Energy. Xcel Energy, for those that are from the southern part of Wisconsin, we serve northwestern Wisconsin, but also 7 other states where we serve 2.2 million electric customers, all the way down to Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Minnesota, North, South Dakota, and a little bit in the UP of Michigan as well. And that mix of states there shows one of our competitive advantages when it comes to serving data centers and other customers. We have a lot of access to some of the best low-cost wind resources in the country, solar as well. We see a lot of interest from data centers because of that. And as you can imagine, we have a few data center projects going on. We've been very transparent with our shareholders and disclosed, our pipeline of data centers on our earnings call. Currently, we have upwards of 8 gigawatts of data centers seeking to interconnect across our service territories. For context, every gigawatt of data center is about 1 million residential single-family homes worth of annual electricity consumption. That's 8 million residential customers essentially seeking to interconnect to the grid over a period of time. Certainly, as discussed on the earlier panel, some amount of double counting or forecast variance going on as data centers go to multiple utilities and seek interconnection simultaneously. So something we look to navigate, and that first panel discussed that quite a bit. Serving these large loads at a time of transformational change in the generation portfolio, cleaning of the grid, the closure of coal assets, when more customers are also choosing to electrify their homes, businesses are choosing to electrify, the onshoring of manufacturing, which we've seen a substantial portion of as well, and the electrification of the transportation industry. Truly makes for a challenging environment. However, we're up for the challenge. The stakes are high, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and good morning. And also want to thank Kristen and Customers First for having me. I'm Delaney Brewer. I'm with Frederickson & Byron. I'm an attorney here in Madison with an energy practice. And first I should say I'm giving my opinion only on the panel today. I'm not speaking on behalf of any client or clients or client group. But, I've historically had sort of 2 main parts to my energy practice, the permitting of the generation, generally for IPPs like David was speaking about when he was up here, and then assisting large energy users sort of navigate, the regulatory system. And that second half has really changed over the last few years. with the data center boom, so to speak. And my practice has really started leaning towards assisting very large energy users with navigating some of the regulatory questions around energy use and development. And so, my job mainly these days seems to be to help navigate the intersection of two very, very different industries. You have sort of the tech industry, the data centers. It's very fast-paced. It's ever-changing. It's very competitive, and they're not used to a lot of regulation. And they're now taking this energy-first approach because of their energy needs, and they're kind of combining or colliding with the regulated utility industry, which is sort of slow and steady. This is how we've always done it, very risk averse, very heavily regulated. And that intersection has been really interesting and fun to navigate. And I think that's probably why we're all here. I think we're going to see some changes on both sides there. So with that, I will pass it.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, great. I am Carrie Valley. I'm the Senior Director of State Policy and Strategy at MISO, and recognize a lot of folks here might not be that familiar with what MISO does as an organization, so level set there. So MISO is the grid operator in the middle of the country. We have a service area that covers 15 states and the province of Manitoba. We serve approximately, or I should say, 45 million customers are served within the MISO footprint, 77,000 miles of transmission lines. And I know David had offered a framework for the capacity. He had mentioned, I think, 135 megawatts. I think that might be the accredited capacity. Our current installed capacity right now is 203 gigawatts in our footprint. So MISO has three main tasks in front of it. It manages the flow of electricity, we facilitate one of the world's largest energy markets, and we plan for the grid of the future. So when you think about what MISO's role and connection is with the load growth in the footprint, it's really looking at what load growth is expected, what generation resources are going to be needed to serve the type of load that's coming online, and where is that transmission to serve that and to move that energy going to be located. So following up on some of the issues related to the load forecast, and that is an ongoing question. We have multiple streams of load forecasting that are going on to try to identify this issue. How much is real? How much do we expect? And what time horizon are we looking at? So one of the things we've looked at the MISO region, in the last 20 years, we had negligible load growth. Folks have talked about that. In the next 20 years, we're looking at a significant increase at a base of about 2.6% annual growth rate, and upwards of 60% increase over the next 20 years, excuse me. So a whole different picture than we've looked at before. So what is MISO doing to support this? One of the things, to kind of put things in a few buckets, I want to know the framing is looking at novel, creative, complex solutions to these problems. They are not easy to solve. They vary by area, type of addition. So we're looking at all of those factors in terms of what framework is needed to support that, and what are in answering to the needs of the footprint. So we've done to mitigate resource adequacy risk and position the industry to support this economic development. We can put it into three buckets. I'll just give an overview of those here, as we'll probably get into the conversation more. But first, we improve price signals. We inform resource retirement and investment decisions. And impacting our part of the process is to bring, the resources online more quickly. We, provide analysis. We give that load forecast picture, and give the more, transparency on a wider scale than maybe be able to look at on a state-by-state basis. We also look at the grid investments that are needed. Those are critical. MISO started out with the first of a kind region-wide transmission system planning back in the 2008 to 2010 framework, resulting in the first multi-value portfolio being approved in 2011. That has been reflected on as sort of the grand achievement in our industry for years. up until the most recent few years, where we were able to replicate that, looking at the needs of the footprint again with our first long-range transmission portfolio that was approved in 2022. Now, last year, approved a second tranche of long-range transmission planning solutions to serve these needs. And as we look, that planning framework was done before we saw this exponential increase in the spot load growth. The additional area that we're looking at is operations. We're continuing to make improvements in our operations to add to that efficiency. And I don't know if I got to the conclusion. All of this work translates to about $5.1 billion in annual benefits to customers for about a $300 to $330 million cost. So we're really proud of offering that benefit. So, thanks.
Good morning. I'm Tom Content. I'm with the Citizens Utility Board, and I'm here with a lot of questions and hopefully a few answers. A lot of questions because my background is as a journalist, so I was asking a lot of questions back then. I still have a lot of questions about the need for speed, and the balance between that and then getting it right as a state, and making sure we can do that. So I think about why does CUB exist in the first place? And the Wisconsin legislature 45 years ago had the vision to create a CUB, and one of the reasons was to make sure that the small customers, the homeowners, the renters, the farmers, the Main Street businesses had a voice and had a customer advocate at the PSC to go up against the utilities, which were already at the commission with their applications to do different things, and also to go up against big business because big business was already present at the commission. And so when I think about the data center issue, I think it's one of the looking ahead. This is one of the reasons why we do exist, is to make sure that the customers, the small customers, are protected. And one of the things that we do as a consumer advocate office is we're always in the issue. We're always looking at who pays. It always comes back to who pays, and how do you balance those costs, and how do you ensure those costs are fair. And we've had that with large customers in the past, large customers that are tens of megawatts or up to 100 megawatts, and now we're talking about orders of magnitude of difference. And so the key going forward is how can we do this in a way that can not only allow economic development to happen, but do it in a way that can put downward pressure on rates, as Tyler was suggesting earlier, and do it in a way that recognizes the need for speed, but also recognizes the need for policymakers to actually have a vision for where we want to go and how we do it in the fairest way possible. So we have to think about with orders of magnitude difference, with a data center equivalent to 1 million customers, it's you're plunking an entire new city into the state, and so getting it wrong is too risky. So I want to make sure that we have that frame of reference as we consider this.
Great, thank you. So with that in mind, I think we heard in the first panel's discussion some discussion of the different potential benefits that data center customers bring to a utility system, potentially to existing customers, to the regional grid, and then some of the challenges, risks, or costs. And so we've heard some discussion throughout the morning. Tom just mentioned potential downward pressure on rates, potential maximization of existing facilities and systems. I'd like to give you all an opportunity to chime in on that. Delaney, if we could start with you, just what do you see as the big key potential benefits and risks that we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think again, this is Delaney's opinion only, not the opinion of the firm or any clients. But I think some might say, as an attorney might say about my profession, that there are good and bad actors. And sometimes the bad actors create a reputation that attorneys might not love. I think that exists with data centers as well. There's a broad range, as we heard earlier, of types. There's a broad range of sizes. And it's a very competitive field. And so the reason, at least one of the reasons that I've observed that we are trying to figure out what's real, as Carrie said, is because sometimes one actor may learn that another industry actor is proposing a data center and then pretend that they want to build a data center there, right? And gum up the forecasting for everyone. So I think transparency is a really big challenge right now because you have that competitive, concern. But again, the regulators need to get involved early. They need to know what's going on in order to help this move forward. And then another challenge is the idea of anti-discrimination, not just among classes, but among actors within a class when you have that transparency issue on the forefront. But with those challenges aside, I think there are a lot of opportunities. A lot of what we've talked about, economic development and so forth, but I also think that there's an opportunity here to fundamentally reduce risk to a regulated utility because many of these types of customers are willing to take on some of that risk. Risk that the residential customers or small commercial customers would normally have may be absorbed by some of those large data center customers, and that could really provide some advantages. And I also think, keep in mind that this is the industry of innovation. So the opportunity to force some innovation it exists, and if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be, the tech industry.
That's great. Thanks, Delaney. And Tom, would you like to jump in? Is there anything you would add to the opportunities and costs?
Sure. I mean, certainly there's definitely an economic development opportunity. It's a different kind of economic development opportunity than, say, an auto manufacturing plant in terms of the net increase in jobs. You get the temporary construction jobs. You get, but the tax base impacts. But the opportunity is balanced against risk, and I think the opportunity is to see how we can maximize it for everyone. And transparency, I agree, is a key. And one of the big questions, you'll hear me saying I have questions. One of the big questions is this issue of what's real. I mean, there are lots of industry forecasts out there that talk about, this is the growth, and this is the growth rate, and this is the number of gigawatts over umpteen years. There's one in particular, I think it's Grid Strategies, you're looking at up to 135 gigawatts nationally in the next 5 years. But a data center company that I talked to recently said, that's the ceiling. So what's the floor? And he said the floor could be as low as 20. So the 20 and 120 is a big difference. And so that's where the forecasting issue becomes so critical.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Carrie, would you add anything to the discussion?
One point I'd note for this group that might be helpful to understand too is that the economic and resource planning is within the jurisdiction of the states in the MISO footprint. So the load-serving entities, the states, and the regulators in those states really decide the resource adequacy, resource mix, how projects are coming online. What MISO does is we respect those decisions and try to create that market construct, the planning framework, and have the transmission in place to serve the needs of the footprint. So in terms of what we want to do is be ready for it as the states are making these decisions.
Great, thanks for that, Carrie. And Terrell, would you add any opportunities or risks that haven't been discussed yet?
Just a few, just not to duplicate, but on the community side, I think the one thing that's often discussed last is that these data centers are wonderful community partners. We've seen this with our Meta project in Minnesota, QTS in Colorado. They donate to local communities. They do job training for electricians and other trades. Very important benefit. One of the core principles that Xcel Energy has to serve data centers is to seek innovative partnerships with data centers as part of our negotiations and our deals. Taking our balance sheet, our strong balance sheet, taking the balance sheet strengths of the top 10 companies in the world, and leveraging that to pull forward innovation, especially firm dispatchable, clean, firm technology, so we can meet our carbon reduction targets. and also serve data centers faster. Something that's very exciting to us. And lastly, I'm going to be a little more firm on this than you were in your opening comments, but net benefits to other customers must materialize to serve these customers. It's a prerequisite. It's one of our core principles that when we onboard data centers, they can't just pay their costs. They have to pay a share of all of the customers' costs, their fair share of all the costs, so that we should see some rate relief for other customers, at least lower than what would have otherwise occurred if that data center didn't come to the system. It's one of our core principles. On the risk side, there are a lot of risks. Risk is part of cost causation. If you're causing risk to occur, you should bear that risk. I like the five-legged stool principle. It's a great way to look at it. Another approach that we take is, or that what I've observed is, there's really no new risks here. They're just bigger risks, right? We've faced stranded asset risk with all of our existing customers today. Might be in the orders of tens of millions of dollars or hundreds for some of our largest customers. We're talking about high $100 million or billion-dollar stranded asset risk here. It's the same risk. It's just the scale and scope is a lot larger, which warrants some creative thinking and different approaches. So that's the incremental stuff I have.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So kind of following up on that thread, you're looking at some of the same risks that a utility already faces, completely different scale. What are the guiding principles that Xcel is using, for example, when we're looking at this question of what are the types of policies that regulators, utilities, RTOs should be doing in terms of planning to maximize these benefits and mitigate the risks? What are you doing at Xcel?
Yeah, happy to share. We've been very transparent with our commissions and shareholders about how we plan to approach data centers. Early on, almost 2 years ago now, we developed a set of core principles to serve what we call large loads. Not just data centers. We're seeing substantial electrification in West Texas and East New Mexico, and oil and gas electrification, substantial electric vehicle expansion, and especially in Colorado. So these principles apply across the board, and they work for Xcel Energy. Other utilities may have different geographies or needs or risks they're trying to mitigate. But for us, the first one is large customers will pay their fair share, and we're going to try to maximize margin and benefits to other customers. Principle one, which I kind of highlighted earlier, that's the net benefits to other customers. Secondly, we will not offer discounted rates. We've got an 8 gigawatt backload of data centers. It's not a competitive situation on the rate front, right? We've seen data centers fall out. We fill them in with the next one in the queue. We move on. So we don't offer discounted rates anymore. On the risk front, we optimize risk avoidance and to protect our existing customers and our shareholders and Xcel Energy. Fourth is the innovative partnership. We want to pull forward technological innovation by combining the balance sheets of the healthy balance sheets of our companies with the data centers, and bring other partners along as well. Lastly, we have the first utility in the company to announce a 100% carbon-free goal by 2050. We're well on our way to hitting 80% by 2030. We're over 60% carbon-free today. We intend to hit those goals in partnership with our data centers. We need to balance these additions with our carbon targets that we have and some of our states have as well. These goals are high level. They color how we approach deals. And there's many ways to get a deal done with a data center within this framework. So we also like to see, we've seen across our states different approaches to meeting these goals. So Wisconsin, we may take a different approach given the regulatory construct than we will in Minnesota. If the commission has different rules over there, as we will in Texas or Colorado. So flexibility is important, which is why our goals may seem high level to this group. But they're important as we approach deals with data centers, and it's important to be transparent with these customers so they understand the position we're starting from during negotiations and deal making.
Great, thank you, Terrell. Thanks for bringing that. And Delaney, following up on that, you mentioned a little bit earlier the data centers working with utilities on these deals and the topic of transparency and being able to plan from a statewide perspective or even a regional perspective up front, and how those two sometimes intersect and don't intersect. So do you have guiding principles, policy solutions that you would recommend along those lines or any other lines?
I might just add a little to what really has been said by all the panelists. But, I think, as I noted, I think transparency is a challenge because there are differing opinions on it between utilities, between different customers. There certainly is a reason why, a proposed data center might not be willing to show their hand to the public right away. And that's understandable, and it's sort of part of that different industry. But I also think what makes it a little bit difficult is I'm not going to offend you on my. It's a little bit unilateral when you're regulated utilities on the other side of the table, right? And the regulator's not yet involved. And so that's just when we're talking about that, the sort of the policy guiding principle, I think we need to keep in mind as we figure out how this is all going to work, is that there is still an obligation to serve, and even data centers or other large energy users, they are still customers, and so they do still need the regulators. They do still depend on the regulators. Nobody that I've spoke to that is involved in this sort of transition has really pushed deregulation. This is probably not the time for that, right? So all of the customers, from Tom's folks to some of my clients, recognize that Wisconsin is regulated, and they're relying on that. So I don't know if that really answers your question. I danced around it a little, but I think transparency is a tough one.
Yeah, it does. I mean, within Wisconsin's regulatory environment, do you see a specific planning process that would be useful? So I know IRP has been discussed before. We have generic dockets ongoing and new ones open all the time in the state. What do you see as the mechanism for that regulatory involvement in the early stages?
Yeah, I mean, I think the piecemeal, a little bit of piecemeal approach that has historically worked in Wisconsin, we might need to change that mindset. What the answer actually is, whether it's an IRP or an IRP light or a SEA on steroids, I'm not sure, and I guess I would ultimately leave that up to the legislators and the regulators. But I think it would behoove us to take a step back and think about long-term planning, not just on a utility basis, and the reason for that is because of IPPs, because of power purchase agreements, virtual power purchase agreements and virtual power plants and all the other sort of non-regulated utility players that are kind of stepping in to try to help solve this problem. I don't think it's a bad idea to do some long-term planning. I just don't know exactly what that looks like and what obligations come with it, which I think is really one of the big hurdles. Is we can plan and maybe see what the future looks like, but then what do we do with that? And there are differing opinions on whether that should come with some obligations.
Great, thank you for that, Delaney. And Tom, I'll go to you, and then Carrie, I'll go to you on the MISO side after Tom for what you're doing on planning right now. Tom, if we want to shape Wisconsin's energy future intentionally and responsibly, what are the guiding principles, priorities, or policies that we need to have in place?
Sure, I think the topics have already been mentioned: transparency, planning. I think transparency. You see, some states are requiring actually the utilities to actually file the data center load forecasts in different buckets of this is under contract, or we believe 80% firm. Maybe the 50%, different buckets, and then have that regular reporting requirement. I think the piecemeal approach does need to change. I think most states have an integrated resource planning process that allows for commission review of each utility's resource plan, and so that's something that is paramount. And even states that have those plans in planning processes in place have updated them to to address this large load hyperscale data center challenge, where they can have a planning process, but also be nimble and do it in the most expeditious way possible. And I think the other guiding principle is also we have to ask the big question of how do we want these costs to be allocated? There are two models out there, and then there's a whole spectrum in between. There's a model of just firewall, insulating, ring fencing the data company or the tech company and the data center, and so that just those costs of the generation needed to serve it are paid for. But then on the other spectrum, should a data center company be basically like another super large, hyper large industrial customer, whereas as Terrell mentioned, the other customers get those system benefits, the system benefits of having that large load on the grid, and that helps put the downward pressure on rates that Terrell is saying is job one, or principle number one. So I think above all, it's a deliberative process, and then because we're talking about the supply side, I think one of the guiding principles should be to actually have attention on the demand side, whether it's demand response, energy efficiency, investments, and/or virtual power plants that was discussed earlier, and behind the meter generation. There are data center developers that are developing projects with flexible load in mind. So they're bringing dozens or hundreds or more of batteries to the site, and so that there are ways to do this. And demand response doesn't have to be the typical demand response that you think of just power down when the prices are high or when demand the grid is different. From a hyperscaler point of view, again, we have this concern about double counting or triple counting or quintuple counting, but assume that a lot of these do get built in multiple states. It should be, and I think it is, in the business model of the Googles and the Microsofts, et cetera, if power is peaking and prices are peaking in MISO, let's power down a MISO data center and power up in a different territory. So load shifting as a form of tech demand response.
Great, thank you, Tom. And Carrie, what are you working on at MISO? I think you've already had to implement some changes to your planning.
Yes. So we are looking at this very broadly. And I think going back to even the foundational principles that Commissioner Nieto had asked about, we really look at reliability, sustainability, affordability, and the intersection of all those things. And I know that's the intersection of all those things that the folks in this room are interested in. And so when we look at transparency, understanding what's out there, I think that is one of the places MISO can add a lot of value. You can see the global picture of what's going on in the planning framework. So MISO, as I mentioned before, has this long-term planning process. We've recently, we passed 2 tranches of long-range transmission projects in the last several years. We're working right now on updating our futures analysis. So looking for the engagement of our states. What does that look like? What are those planning scenarios that we're planning for? How do they bookend our processes? And that's a long-term view. And then in looking at the projects to solve the needs identified. On a shorter-term basis, we have immediate needs today. People are coming forward to these, to our load-serving entities, our states, and in the MISO footprint to bring these new projects online. So I mentioned earlier these sort of creative, novel solutions to these complex problems. Working together with our regulators, we kicked off just late last year what we call our Expedited Resource Addition Study, ERAS, so really timely in the news at the time to keep it in everybody's, the forefront of their mind. But it became the biggest issue that we were confronted with, and we talked about it all of our meetings, our stakeholder meetings. How are we going to do this to bring those resources online in the near term to meet these new large load additions? We have engagement from our states in particular. What was necessary, because we're thinking of how is this a novel process that's not following the rules necessarily of the past. It's trying to craft a new path forward to meet an identified need. And so what we're looking for is to be consistent in treatment of different resources and needs, but also being able to identify when something different is needed, the ability to offer a new perspective and a plan. And so this expedited resource addition study really changed the processing of new additions for generation from our standard queue right now is a lengthy process. It's about 3 to 4 years. And we're working on those improvements. We've got processes underway to bring that down to a 1-year processing time frame by the end of 2028. In the near term, we're looking at a process where now we can look at projects on a serial basis, on a quarterly basis, and review those projects in 90 days and get to a generator interconnection agreement when they are tied to a specific need within a state. And it is that tie to a specific need within a state that is necessary to sort of hopefully get us over the hurdle at our Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to have this framework to serve those needs. And it's part of moving forward with this. So MISO has a very open, transparent stakeholder process. And we have a specific process, even in addition to that, with our states, with our individual states and the organization of MISO states, which is the collective body that comes together to review what is it MISO's doing and how is it going to work for us. So 15 states have 15 different regulatory environments. So we're trying to make this work in as many places as possible. Our states came together. They worked on tariff language for MISO, which is first of a kind. We don't usually have other people writing provisions to put into the MISO tariff, but they did. They worked together to see how is this going to work in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, in the Dakotas, in Mississippi, in Arkansas, and trying to craft that solution and brought it forward. And so we brought it into our stakeholder process. We worked to make sure that that was going to work in the MISO footprint as much as possible. A couple of states we still have to do some work with, that it's not quite going to work for them, but moving that forward. But having the state be able to, so as part of that project in a roundabout way, is part of this overall framework is the state has to actually, or the relevant electric retail regulatory authority, which is often a state but could be a cooperative or a municipal utility board, really gives that acknowledgement that this project is needed to serve this need identified. And that is the foundational element to get into the ARAS process for study and have this method to get these resources online quickly.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, the RERAs, right? Oh, an excellent acronym. Great, thank you for that. I think, Kristen, time-wise, we could either go to audience questions here or we have a lightning round question we could ask our panelists, so I'll leave it up to you. Okay, great. So this is a lightning round question in honor of Kristen Jilks. Lightning round for anyone who wants to chime in. If you had all the power, what is the one measure that you would put into place to protect consumers and the public and take advantage of the opportunities that lie ahead? You have to pick one. It looks like it's you, Terrell.
Oh boy. Well, I think adheres to our core principles. That's 5. Maybe I'm cheating, but there's a process put in place, and I think adhering to that process is important, and creating a predictable environment for data centers to operate in and interconnecting and utilities to do deals in. We've seen other states get a data center in, and when Microsoft hit in Wisconsin, all of our phones went off the hook because now the market's open, and one of the big players made it happen. And we've seen other states where that happens, and regulators or legislators sort of panic. Like, we need all these new bills and legislation. We need these new regulatory constructs. And that can create a lot of uncertainty in the market and difficult to get deals done in. So I guess my other than the core principles is let's create a solid regulatory environment, or keep our solid regulatory environment, keep it predictable and certain so that we can do deals in it and bring good projects, both on the generation and transmission side, but also on the tariff and contractual front with data centers to the commission for approval. Quickly also, if I'm giving advice to the legislature on how to create that environment, the first round of data centers are going to interconnect to the current transmission system. The next round are going to interconnect to the new transmission system, which is being planned, permitted at the commission right now. That means passage of transmission right of first refusal speeds up interconnection times by a year. And that's been a heavily discussed issue, so I'll stop there. Don't limit generation options. If right now, 10 to 15 years for a nuclear unit. I think some of the natural gas CT books are up 5 to 6 years. Renewables are an important part of this. Natural gas is going to be an important part of this. Limiting generation options is going to slow development and opportunities. So my message there is simple. We need all the generation types. We need truly an above all of the above approach to meet the demand that's coming to the system. Don't put limitations in the way that may change that mix or limit opportunities there. I'm not sure if that was one thing. I apologize.
Well, you had all the power, so Here's fair game. Delaney?
I would just add, in addition to not adding new limitations, my request is very simple. Another ALJ at the commission. Maybe a couple more. Maybe 20 more staff engineers. That's it. I want for little.
Sure. All the power. I'm going to let the power go to my head. I think the bottom line is in this that there's just so much irrational exuberance about and hype about this that Chewy.com exists today, but Pets.com crashed during a period of irrational exuberance, and I just think we have to be. My vision is that we take all this need for speed and we counter that with a deliberative process that actually evaluates everything and every customer and the public interest all in one. The elephant in the room is the stranded cost issue. So if we can find a way to accommodate data centers and this load growth, it's going to add roughly expand the size of a utility system by a quarter or a third or a half, and do it in a way that these power plants that are going to be around us for decades, for data centers that right now we don't know what their business plan is for 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now. If we can do all that in a way to reducing cost to all the customers and protecting on that stranded asset question, I think we'll have accomplished a lot. And since I have all this power, I will just say that MISO does a lot of the right things right, and not every RTO is the perfect model, but a consumer advocate office at the MISO level is something that we could learn from one of the other RTOs.
And so from my perspective, I think kind of consistent with the themes here, though, but we want to let reliability needs drive retirements and also remove barriers to new generation and transmission. Those are things that we're really struggling with right now as we look at the evolving mix of fleet resources and then what are the demands of the system going forward. And from a person that's worked extensively in our stakeholder process and trying to move these initiatives forward, really from a personal level, really look for that compromise. It's really, as we look for these novel solutions, it might not be what any particular stakeholder or stakeholder group was looking for, but we really try to get as close as possible to meeting as many needs as possible. So I really appreciate the compromise and flexibility that people bring to the table.
Thank you. Thanks, Carrie and Tom. Great, and shall we go to audience questions? All right.
Dave Bernal, Oconto County. So far today we talked about data centers, load growth, expansion, development, transmission, transparency. The word ROFR was just used a few minutes ago. What is the concern of benefit for the people who are for ROFR? And what is the concern of benefits for the people who are against ROFR, right of first refusal?
I don't have a dog in this race.
How much time do we have?
I'll take it first. Well, I think vis-a-vis data centers, time to market. And we just heard, in the first panel that time to market is the primary concern of data centers. Transmission right of first refusal eliminates a competitive bidding process that utilities are already doing on the front end, and that speeds up transmission permitting on those next round of high voltage transmission lines that data centers interconnect to. So I think that's relative to the data center discussion, that's the benefit.
Thanks, Daryl. And would anyone else like to chime in? Tom?
Sure. I think on the ROFR issue, I think we believe in the value of the competitive bidding construct, and the fact is that in our system, we are rewarding the utilities for building a lot of investment through the return on equity and the returns that they get for that. And so having a competitive bidding process makes sure that our utilities are sharpening their pencil so that they can go out and win those bids and deliver savings for customers that they're already talking about, as well as savings on the capital cost of the project.
Thank you.
Hi, Rachel Holloway, Dane County. I have a question. I don't know if you could speak to this or not, but I am curious, given the scale, particularly of hyperscale, do you have any sense of the implications for municipal tax base when these things are developed? And does that matter whether it's, public or private? I assume there's a lot of variety there. And I'm not sure how that's treated, if it's unique in Wisconsin as far as the, what's in the building in terms of equipment versus the construction of the buildings. And just what communities can expect about that, or what are you hearing?
Great question. Would anyone like to speak to that?
I think briefly that it depends on the type of data center. I think one of the for those who follow utility dive closely over the last year, a lot of attention was placed on Ohio, and one of the reasons that Ohio's utility and their regulatory system was taking a hard look and requiring a lot of guarantees, whether it's the parental guarantees that Tyler was talking about, or just pretty strict tariffs, was because of the experience with the Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin crypto miners, data mining operations that Ohio experienced, and then those companies up and left. And so that gets back to that stranded cost question. So with the hyperscalers, we're hoping that's not as much of a concern, because they're already in this business of enterprise preserving all of our cloud data and businesses' cloud data already.
Yeah, if I could add just quickly, one of the challenges that I faced personally when this market hit is just to understand the scale and scope, because it is unlike anything the industry's seen. And so I Googled what was Wisconsin's largest construction project, just to get a comparison. I think it was the stadium in Milwaukee was the largest construction project in the state. These are probably larger construction projects than that. I don't know the property tax implications. There's a sales tax exemption, which many states have. But these are multi-billion-dollar investments from hyperscalers in communities that have tax limitations on raising funds for schools, for their municipal operations. Our communities are starting to ask us questions frequently. How can we attract a data center? We have to have this really good site north of town. Can you help us bring? We see you have a transmission line there. Can you bring them in? So we do a lot of education with our communities about what we've seen in other states. We have a deal with Meta in Minnesota and QTS with Colorado. So we have some of the learnings. The tax structures are different by states, and the exemptions, and et cetera. But as we start to see projects in Wisconsin, we'll continue to get questions, because there are substantial benefits to local communities.
Thank you.
I would just add a sort of a secondary benefit. When utility infrastructure is built, there's shared revenue benefits in addition. So, these facilities are going to be developed, but then there's also going to be infrastructure developed to support them, and that comes with additional financial benefits for the local communities that they're located in.
Great. I'm not seeing any more questions. Thank you all very much. This was an excellent discussion. Thanks a lot to this great panel. Good job. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you to our second panel for an excellent discussion. And as we bring our program to a close, I'm honored to introduce our final speaker of the morning. Representative Scott Krug has served in the Wisconsin State Assembly since 2011, representing the 72nd Assembly District. He currently serves as Assistant Majority Leader and played a key role in bringing a major data center project to Wisconsin Rapids, my hometown, revitalizing the site of a former paper mill that meant so much to the community. Please join me in welcoming Representative Scott Krug.
Go Rapids, right? I mean, it's a way to start a day off, is give some props to the hometown. So yeah, I am State Representative Scott Krug. I represent 72nd Assembly District. For those that aren't caught up on the newest of the versions of the maps, this is my 4th map that I've served under. It's always included the Wisconsin Rapids area. Typically has had Adams County as part of it. Juneau County is now part of it, so I lost some with Sharon and some Portage. So anywhere around central Wisconsin, south of Wausau, north of the Dells, I've probably represented at some point. So if you're in that little area, that's where I've been historically. Wanted to come today and first thank you for all your partnership and your time and being available to have discussions today. These are things that are super important to not only Wisconsin Rapids, but every other one of our communities that we represent at the Capitol. And I think, the story of what happened in Wisconsin Rapids is a really good precursor to what is going to happen in the rest of the state of Wisconsin over the next 10 to 15 years, right? So we've had that paper mill for about 125, 130 years, was consolidated, went to Verso, New Page, Stora Enso, every different iteration over the years, and finally got to the point where Billerud decided to buy it and shut it down. I always say when I was the guy sitting in that chair when the paper mill went out of business, that would be my last session because the voters would just say, no, we're not going to send that guy back. So we decided to be a little proactive, and Senator Teston and I created what we called the Rapids Together Task Force. So what we did is we took everybody out of their silos, trying to get a win to figure out how to solve it themselves, come together and figure out some solutions that might work for Wisconsin Rapids. One of the ideas that actually came up during the task force was working with the WEDC on what at that point were these new concepts of these wide-scale, large-scale data centers, right? And knowing what we had in Wisconsin Rapids as far as availability for power, space, workforce, and all those things trying to come together to figure out what could end up replacing this behemoth that my great-great-grandfather all the way down to my generation worked at over these last 100-some years. So finally, a few years after the mill had closed down, we had this announcement made recently. DPO, one of the big companies that kind of spearheads these projects, said, hey, you've got a really cool concept going on here. You've got some space. You're right next to a hydroelectric dam. How about we create this project where we use, not a huge part of the paper mill property, but enough adjacent to the hydroelectric dam that we could use this as a renewable energy resource for a $200 million data center. I was like, okay, thanks for coming, right? So since that announcement was made in, I think, January, maybe February it was, we've seen that project has been dwarfed 5 times over by other projects in the state of Wisconsin. But the saving grace for us being probably the 5th or 6th biggest announcement being made out there is that there's more coming. And that rural Wisconsin's on the map. And that's why we lean on your partnership so much to help everybody in the industry understand that rural Wisconsin is a major player in the availability of workforce, ready power, all the resources you need for recreation for employees to come live there. We always say it's a great place to live, work, stay, and play, right? You look at all of the opportunities we have in those rural areas of the state that make it easy for folks to get away and to still earn a living. We're super excited to have this project be part of what our next generation can count on in the Wisconsin Rapids area. Does it replace the 1,000-some jobs at the paper mill? No. But were those jobs going to be there regardless? No, right? So we're looking at those opportunities, and other companies will come and follow and pick up on the rest of what's been laid down as the initial project. So I think just that story alone, where we're bringing together local leaders, state partner, energy producers, anybody and everybody who wants to talk about projects across rural Wisconsin, having a seat at the table. It's been super important to us in the Assembly Republican Caucus this session, trying to find more opportunities, trying to find ways to incentivize those opportunities once they're visualized, and to make sure that they become a reality in the end. So I think that's our biggest push this last half of our session, So make sure that whatever ideas are out there that we can help bring them to reality with your help. And that help means being even bigger advocates, coming over to the building when bills are in front of us, testifying, sending us emails, talking to other members of the leadership teams in the Assembly and the Senate, making sure that everybody knows what issues are important to you and how we can be a good partner to get those things done. So I just wanted to stop by and tell you that story today about little old Wisconsin Rapids in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. That's got some great opportunities because we're really capitalizing what the future of energy can be in this state. So just as a closing, wanted to be here to thank you all for that. Also wanted to thank Customers First Coalition for hosting the dialogue and the panelists today. I know Chairperson Strand and Commissioner Nato are here as well. I wanted to thank them and all the panelists and the sponsors, and most of all, again, thank you all individually, right? It's not just you being here today. It's your partnership and advocacy that we depend on. I see a lot of faces around the room that I've worked with for quite a long time on a lot of different issues. Please keep us on the front of your mind as willing partners to help solve some of the problems you're facing. So with that, I will let you off the hook and then let you enjoy your day. And thank you again for the time to come say hello this morning. Thank you.
You have been watching a production of WisconsinEye, your unfiltered window into legislative deliberations and public policy programming, where our mission is to provide Wisconsinites an opportunity to access the legislative process and connect with conversations that inform our citizenry. Please consider supporting our mission, and thank you for watching. WisconsinEye, policy made public.
Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Please support our work. You can subscribe to the Electric Wire podcast if you haven't already, and you can follow us on Twitter @The Electric Wire. Thanks also to the members of the Customers First Coalition for supporting this podcast. Our members are Dairyland Power Cooperative, Madison Gas and Electric, the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, WPPI Energy, the Citizens Utility Board, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 2150, and the Wisconsin Electric Cooperatives Association. Thanks again for listening. We'll have a new episode next month.